It's all well and good having a built aeroplane, but the people that sit in them, flow and look after them on day to day, things like that, they're the important ones to me. These objects are very emotional at times, very, very much so. The relations are still here, they're still living, they're still in people's memories. That's the beauty of these objects.
Welcome to the Fighting High podcast Hangar Talk episode. Every historic aircraft has two stories. There's the story of its design, construction and operational service, but perhaps more importantly, there's the story of the people whose lives became intertwined with it, those who built it, flew it, maintained it and in many cases never returned home. In this episode I speak with Darren Priday, manager of the Michael Beetham Conservation Centre at the RAF Museum Midlands, about the remarkable conservation of the museum's Handley Page Hampden. What emerges is not simply the restoration of a rare bomber, but the restoration of memory itself. Darren, welcome to the Fighting High podcast. And before we talk about the Hampden itself, could you tell us a little bit about your role at the RAF Museum and the work of the Michael Beetham Conservation Centre?
Yes, certainly can. I joined the museum 21 years ago after serving in the RAF. Very, very fortunate because not a lot of jobs come up in the centre, to be honest. And I've been the manager now for the last 13 years, which has been an absolute privilege. So the role here really, my role here is to look after the large object collection. So aeroplanes, vehicles, things like that, and anything associated with them. I have an oppo who looks after the small objects. And of course, there's that little bit in the middle where we fight over. It depends how nice it is, the thing in the middle that we fight over, who looks after it. We are based here at the Cosford, or officially as we know now as the Midlands site, but I just happen to be based here. I look after the objects down in London. I get involved up at our reserve collection Stafford, and with us being a national museum as well, a lot of our objects we loan out, so I'm always speaking with other and working with other museums as well, which is a lovely part of the job, to get to see all these other beautiful collections. Over the years, what we've really been doing here is been the sort of conservation stroke restoration side. Sort of in the time that I've been here, well, we had come out the door Wellington. We've recovered the Dornier 17, which is now on display here at Cosford. We've done the Lysander, which is down in London, which I think is a stunning job. Involved in the RAF centenary and the big exhibition change around down in London. A couple of years back in the summer, we did the Spitfire tour around the Midlands. So as you can see, it's quite varied what we do. But really what the aim now of my team at the moment is preparing for brand new exhibition here at the Cosford site. I don't know if you visited Cosford recently, but typically we had 4 hangars where you start off, which is oddly numbered number 2. You go 2, 3, 4, then 1. 2, 3, 4 have been open, but that takes you from sort of day 1 right the way up to 1980. In about 12, 18 months' time, our hangar 1 is going to reopen, and that's going to be 1980 to now. So in there, I've just got the odd thing in here, like Bravo November and a Harrier GR3 and Gazelle. For the Cosford Air Show a couple of weekends ago, we had a Reaper, which is part of end up part of the museum collection, with a couple of the GCSs, the ground control stations as well. We've got them, so we're going to have them on the floor, Reaper on the pole above, things like that. So that's what mainly we're aiming at the moment, is this brand new exhibition and supporting the work of the move of closing our Stafford site to the new build here, which become interactive, so open to the public as well in various forms. So yeah, hell of a lot going on at the museum. And of course, the one thing I haven't mentioned, which is what we're here to talk about tonight, which is the Hampden.
So the Handley Page Hampden, it's one of the aircraft that, well, Second World War aviation enthusiasts, they certainly know about, but it's not that well known to the wider public. And what made the Hampden such an important bomber in the early years of the war?
Well, I suppose the simple answer to that was at the start of the Second World War, along with a couple of others, Wellington being one, the Hampdens were the mainstay of Bomber Command. developed from about 1932 actually, when the Air Ministry brought out a new specification for a brand new medium range bomber. And from that specification, the Wellington or the Vickers Project Creasy and the Handley Page Project HP-52 were the chosen aeroplanes. And I say they were the first ones in the early days. The squadrons obviously were taking big hits, but there were some VCs awarded, a couple of early VCs, Leroy being one of them in a Hampden. So yeah, very important at the start of the war, whilst the other bigger bombers, certainly the four-engine bombers, started to appear in the second part of the war.
That's right. It certainly took on some roles in Battle of the Barges, for example, and
Yeah,
as you said,
yeah.
the Dortmund's End Canal and the mine laying. So certainly was there at the front line. Was it? I think there were about over 1,400 were built.
1,432, I'm led to
But
believe.
okay, right. But there's hardly any left.
No.
And I think there's bits perhaps about, but hardly any sort of what you could call complete. I mean, why are there very few around?
Well, the ones I know about obviously is our one. There's no section at East Kirkby, Lynx Aviation, which was lost on the same night on the same operation. And there's one in Vancouver, over in British Columbia in Canada. That's it of anything of significant size that I'm aware of. I suppose there was quite a huge loss during the war anyway. Um, uh, I suppose what I've seen is photographs of Cosford Airfield, and I've seen them up at the beautiful museum up at Hooton Park, post-war sort of aerial photographs, and they're just lined up with various bombers. So they all ended up getting smelted back to probably what they were before. It's sort of a bit of tongue in cheek, and I was sort of joking when I've asked this question before. There was as the war was starting and going on, there was that reclaiming metal sort of, so your knife, fork, spoons, garden fences were all smelted down. So after the war, all our Hampden bombers are probably back is garden fences in knife, forks, and spoons. Say a bit of tongue in cheek, but there's probably a little bit of truth in it somewhere.
Yes, yes, yeah. And the Canadians, because some of the Hamdens were built out in Canada,
Yes.
I think is that correct as well?
Yeah.
So
There was a training school out there, and then there was some built at Canada.
yeah. So the Hamden that's in your care
Yeah.
at the moment, where was it found, and sort of what condition did you find it in?
Well, it was actually the full story. It was part of Operation Orator, and that set off on the night of the 4th, 5th September 1942. Left the most northerly point in the UK, which was at Sombra, and destination being a few airfields in Russia. That was the idea, was to try to get 32 Hamdens out there, all been converted to carrying torpedoes, with the idea of protecting the Arctic convoys as they came into sort of 7-hour sort of flying range. So our one was one of 9 that got lost that evening. So that's over a quarter of the airplanes lost. Just trying to get them out there. Then it spent, obviously, wasn't in Russia, and then once the Berlin Wall come down in late 80s, um, after that, aviation enthusiasts went out to that area, and a Canadian, Gilles Mahal, was the name I've been given, went out there, found it, had it shipped out of Russia, brought back to the UK, and it got assembled, bits of wood hanging underneath it everywhere. And from what I'm told, that's when the museum first got to see it, and they swapped it for museum currency, I think, in those days, which was a Spitfire. And then it was from this probably talking around about 1991, so huge, big, long-term restoration for the fuselage.
The Berlin Wall coming down and the sort of Iron Curtain that opened up that opportunity to go out there and retrieve it.
I think if the Berlin Wall hadn't come down at that time, I think the airplane would still be sat there.
Yeah, and Operation Orator is a fascinating operation. I've just written the story of James Catternack, one of the great 50 who was shot in the Great Escape.
Because there was the two squadrons, 144, which is what our aeroplane, and the Australian 455. And I did have a little look myself, actually, at that point, the ones that were lost, or the crews that were lost that evening, and picked that up. That Catanach, off the Australian squadron, was sadly involved with the Great Escape. Yeah.
Yes, indeed he was. And on this, on your particular Hampden, there's a crew of 5,
Yep.
and I think I'm correct in saying that they're normally a crew of 4, but they took out a member of the ground crew for being there, and two survived, but three were lost, but they were never found.
Well, I suppose the answer is yes, but we know what happened. Again, I've been very, very fortunate now to meet families of all 5 that were on board, including actually one of the survivors, George himself. He was the techie on board of the aeroplane. I got to meet him, and we've had contact with the families over the years. Uh, of the 5, I say that. So it was Robertson on his very first operation, sadly as well, who was killed, along with Daniel Garrity, who was he was a WOP air gunner, but he was on the operation as the rear low gunner, and they were both killed in the air battle. And then when the aeroplane was brought down by being attacked by 2 Messerschmitt 109s, the guy up the front, the navigator bomb aimer, the Canadian Miller, that's when he was killed. And that left 2 did survive, and that was Perry, the pilot, and Corporal George Shepherd, the technician. They ended up being survivors. So yeah, and Robertson obviously then carried on some research into his father, and what his research he found out from the research was that the 3 dead bodies got taken back to Pet Salmo, which was a Luftwaffe base that Perry and eventually George Shepherd. George went on the run for about 36 hours before he was captured. Both the 2 survivors and the 3 bodies all went back to Pet Salmo. The 3 that lost their lives were buried at the German cemetery there, while the other 2 then were processed and sent back down to POW camps, Poland, Germany, that sort of area. So what actually then Robertson also found out that the Pet Salmo graveyard, because it was full of German bodies as well, was bulldozed under Stalin's orders after the war. So
Oh dear.
we know where the body is, but no way of obviously finding it, the individual body. It gave Robertson a bit of closure knowing where his father ended up.
Yeah, yeah. Oh dear. Oh, well, that's terrible. But it just highlights that behind all these artifacts and these aircraft, there's human stories, and those 3 gentlemen are now commemorated on the Runnymede Memorial.
Yeah, and I say at the crash sites of the aeroplane in Russia, there's a plaque commemorated to them as well.
So the aircraft itself, did you say when it arrived with you, it had like bits of wood hanging out of it, and was
It
a
was supported by like bits of wood underneath the wings of tailplanes, just to sort of give it the general shape. And I say that's when the museum first took it on, long before I started, and there had been some work done on the airplane when I joined in 2005, but not too much.
so what was the challenge that faced you?
Yeah, information wasn't too difficult because we had the Handley Page set of drawings, which are great, but sometimes you don't have the latest issue. But you know, most of them were very, very usable. We had a lot of the air publications, APs. And of course, over the years, we were meeting people that either worked or flew on them who could give you a little bit of direction as well. So yeah, it was then talking with the museum. And when I first came in, the idea with the project was to do sort of a 50-50 split of the fuselage, have one side restored, and then the other side just left as is in crash condition. But as we've progressed, it become because obviously we want it on public display, it's got to be safe. We found it incredibly difficult to be able to do that sort of restoration. That's when it got changed then to doing the complete making a replica, the complete representation, sorry, of the complete fuselage, painted back into the colours it would have most likely had when it left Pet Salmo on that evening. We did leave a couple of things. There was evidence inside of where the fire started. The bullet holes from the attack by the Messerschmitt 109, they're still on the side of the fuselage in the back end and things like that.
Was there anything, I mean, in particular that was a challenge for this particular aircraft?
I suppose if I'm talking going back from 1991, and I'm joining the museum in 2005, and hardly anything's been done in that time. I suppose the challenge to the museum was we had just so much going on. Before I joined, they had the Hangar 6 in London, the Milestones building going on. Then there was other exhibitions going on, and it was always trying to find time to put somebody actually onto the project. And eventually we did, because I sort of said to the museum that it's going to sit there for another 10, 15, 20 years if we just keep going at this rate. And we had chat with the senior managers, and they said, "Well, can one person just go on and work on it?" And one of my technicians, who was brilliant hand skills, said, "If you want, I'll do it." And so that was the main challenge, is getting that one person on the and getting the airplane built to the standard that she's at now.
How much of the actual aircraft did you start off with?
The structure you see on the outside of the forward fuselage, that is a complete replica built to the original drawings. But I'm hoping I've got some original pieces in here, which would have been almost impossible to fit in, but I'm hoping the museum will display them alongside the airplane at some point. Now, when you go on to the next piece behind that, which is known as the rear fuselage, there is no center, front straight to rear. Um, that then is significantly more original. I would say probably about 80 to 90% original. It's most the stuff that repaired. There's a couple of skins along the top, but along the sort of the Bombay walls and things like that where it came in. So there's a lot of originals on that. The tail boom itself, the original tail boom is with the aeroplane. We started to look to see if we could do restoration, but we agreed that we were going to lose too much original material. So we built a replica and had the original next to it. And on the tailplane, so the large tailplane double fin and all that, everything that came back is included in the rebuild. So it's sort of, there's a bit of a replication, restoration, conservation, everything gone, all the buzzwords around museum in that one fuselage itself. So yeah, it's quite a nice, quite a challenge. New fabric, things like that. We had the skills here to do the fabric work as well. So yeah.
So I mean, this is probably a question that goes just beyond this project as well. How do you decide what should be restored, repaired, and what simply should be preserved exactly?
Yeah, this is it. Once a project comes in, it's great for the museum to say, "Oh, do the Hampden," but then it's the chat with the curators, the collections division, things like that. Our directors, what is it you're aiming for? And we all sort of sit down around the table and agree on the way forward. So it's not sort of one person making a decision. Some of the curators then will research the aircraft history. If we have photographs of it potentially in a certain paint scheme on a certain squadron, we might decide to go back to that era, and things like that. So there's a lot of chat that goes on, and then we make up a sort of a conservation plan on the way forward.
So in respect to the Hampden, has there been anything particularly difficult in terms of the engineering or conservation challenge for this aircraft?
Um, Probably not. Uh, I was a mechanical engineer in the RAF. I did a lot of skin metal, aluminium sort of skin repairs and things like that during my time. So actually reskinning and making things up. And there was one of the other technicians who had a similar background in Civvy Street. So both of us were pretty good with the hand skills. So that side of it, not really. I think it was just gathering information and then just making sure between both of us, and then the gent that took on the project, and to finish off the forward fuselage, that everything we were doing was accurate, is with all the information we had in front of us. So again, a lot of chatting, looking at drawings, yep, measuring things like that. Couple of little anomalies I saw there, like where the cable runs. There's a main frame. Can't remember the number now. At the start of the rear fuselage, and the cables for the flying controls down the back went through it. So I took off the grommets and things like that on underneath, and it'd only been chain drilled. It was probably an inch square hole, but it'd only been chain drilled. And I was thinking, wow, so you wouldn't see that on modern day aeroplanes. A couple of little things like that surprised me. But then again, if you're designing something, why should somebody spend an hour tidying up a hole if they're not expecting it to last very long in a war? So yeah, that was probably the things that surprised me most. And again, on the actual design of the Hampden as well, there's a lot of chat in modern day engineering about lean manufacture. So getting the nugget at the start to whatever your product is at the end, out the door in the quickest, most efficient way. And the Hampden itself was like that because of the narrowness. The forward fuselage at the rear end is only 36 inches wide. That's 93 centimeters to anybody in the modern day world to understand inches. But the rear fuselage, it's that narrow inside. It was built in two sections. And what they'd done on the jigs, they put them back to back, external surfaces back to back. So one of the technicians then could go around, populate everything, swap them over, and put doublers top and bottom to join it all together. So to me, I'm thinking, even in those days, they were thinking, what is the easiest way of manufacturing? So Yeah, it was nice to see things like that, and it's something when, I've given guided tours of the Hampden, I've pointed out, especially if I've got an engineering group, coming around, understand, sort of showing them the split line between the 2 sections and how all the W is fitted and things like that, yeah.
One of the things that fascinates me is that every aircraft, it represents the people who built it, who flew it and maintained it. Has working on the Hampden made you feel closer connection to those people?
Very very much so, obviously being an ex-RAF aircraft engineer, working on the collection is lovely, absolutely amazing, but I always said all along, the probably the most important thing to me is the people. I'm trying to work. I can't think how many Hampden aircrew I've met, or people associated with the Hampden. I've met some men and ladies that worked in the factories that produced them. One lady that used to work up at Salisbury, she was doing all the fabric work and doing things, battle damage. Amazing to talk to these people. So yeah, to me, that's the most important thing. It's all well and good having a built aeroplane, but the people that sit in them, flow and look after them on day to day, things like that, they're the important ones to me. So again, if I was going to put a number, I'm going to say probably at least 50 related Hampden aircrew. Into that as well, I can add the very sad phone calls that or emails that I get, whereas I get some thick call, or I'll say an email come through from somebody saying, "My father, grandfather, uncle flew in Hampdens, sadly was lost in the war," or sometimes ended up POW, survived the war, but has since passed away. What is a Hampden? So we invite the families to come in, and we do a little bit of background. Once they give us names and things like that, we do a little bit of research to see if we got any further information we're held within the museum, and then we bring them in for their moment with the Hampden. And most people haven't seen the Hampden at all, had no idea, and then we can sort of sit and say, well, your relation was the pilot, and crikey, really up there in that narrowness, and and it helps to give them that little bit of closure, and especially families that maybe have lost relatives, killed during the war. We're very respectful when they walk first in. They see the Hampden. We're not sort of, hey, jolly, 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 here's the Hampden sort of thing. We give them that moment to look at the aeroplane and reflect and just see how they react. Some of them you can just see it brings out a tear and things like that. So these objects are very emotional at times, very very much so. Probably the one that hit me, that it sticks in my memory when people ask me this. Met a gentleman called John Watt. He was 80. His father was wing commander on 144 Squadron, and every night before he went on operation, he phoned his wife. Then this one night he phoned his wife, and she replied back to him, "I'm pregnant." He never returned. So you can imagine this. We had this call from actually the call came through from the historian Dan Snow to the museum, because he'd met John and heard about this story, and said, "Hey, I know about the Hampden." So Dan come up, brought John up. It was during COVID, so we had to do the old 2 meters. And then, you can imagine taking in John, an 80-year-old who was a minus digits when his father was killed on a Hampden, to see an aircraft for the first time. Dan himself's a 6'3", 6'4", same height as me, and there's me, Dan, there's John, Michelle, who's our comms colleague, all of us, just bursting out in tears. And that's what these objects can do to you. I'm not frightened to admit that it's that powerful. It's that emotional, and you can just see it in the families when they come, they have a tear, or just sit there and reflect on their loved one. So, um, that's the beauty of these objects. Again, sort of, I've said to people, if you go to some of the other museums who've got older objects like Roman swords and helmets, you might have names and things like that, but these objects, the relations are still here, they're still living, they're still in people's memories, the ones that have passed away. So very, very powerful objects.
Yeah, what a wonderful focal point for the descendants to learn, to experience, to show empathy, and yeah, what a wonderful, and you're attaching stories to it, and they're still coming. It sounds like as well.
Yeah, yeah. One of my other favorite stories was, uh, w we'd had an open week here, which we used to run when we had things like the Hampden and the Wellington under restoration. Used to open up in November. I had a gent who informed me that he was coming with his father, and his father had been shot down in a Hampden and ended up as POW. Um, and literally just before he came, he found out that the one Wop Air gunner who survived with his father was just the WOP operator, was still alive. So they'd made contact. He was in a care home up in the northeast. Sadly, the pilot and the navigator had both been killed in the crash landing. And a few weeks later, I had a phone call, said, "Oh, my father was, here, got a Hampden. Yes, my father was killed. Very, very sorry to hear. Um, any chance I can come and see?" "Yes. Can you give me your father's name? I'll just see if I got any information." And he told me his father's name, did the database search, got the aircraft number, right, who else was on it? And it was just one guy, and I just mentioned. Of course, and then so I contacted him. "Hey, can I give your contact details?" So all of a sudden, we're knitting families of lost ones together, people that cruise that were on airplanes together as well. Again, another lovely story. Just been able to do that. I think one of the Saturdays in here on the open, we had something like 6 Hampden families in here. Didn't know any of them were coming in, but while they were in here, they all made themselves known, and I think 2 of the families actually had a connection that their relatives were on the same aeroplane. You know, it you got to be there, I think, just to feel that energy
Yeah.
that they bring out, these objects. Incredible.
How wonderful when those moments happen. And the Hampden you've restored, you've had visits, as we were saying, from descendants of the crew. I think it was the daughter of the pilot. Is that correct? She came along to see it.
Yeah, Trish is a good friend of mine. She pops up, when she was ever passing this way, and she would always make at least one journey a year. Robertson's son sadly passed away a few years back, but he was always up here videoing George Shepherd's family. Well, when George came, and I suppose really that started off a lot this for me because not long after I started here, George Shepherd, the techie, came, but he came with his daughter, granddaughter, and great granddaughter. So there are 4 generations all here, and it was the great granddaughter, young girl called. She was only 7. School had obviously given her permission to come, but they said, "Just get some notes and come in and just tell us about it tomorrow." Of course, and she mentioned that to George. He gave her back 2 or 3 pieces of paper with all these notes on, and I'm, "Crikey, what's this?" And showed it to his daughter and his granddaughter, and they had no idea. He kept it hidden away, which again, to be honest with you, when you meet the crews of any of the airplanes, most of them have done over the time. And so George had opened up in writing down on this couple of bits of A4 paper to his great granddaughter to go to school the following day. And really, that's where the whole history and us getting to know a little bit more, because we've seen this. So we started chatting to George about what he wrote down. That's how we knew he'd gone on. He tended to Perry, the pilot, but Perry said, "Your duty is to go home, run west towards Sweden." Then George was on the run, he said, for about 36 hours. By the way, post towards the end of the war, both of them were involved in the long marches or death marches as well. Both would come to Cosford, to the hospital. George was junior ranks. Perry was an officer, so chances are they probably never ever met again in the hospitals, which was sad to know. They were probably both pretty close to each other, but never got to see each other. So yeah, and sort of going back to the young girl, Bethany, I think she was about 7. So 9, 10 years later, she was still in contact with him. She called me up and said, "Hey, can I do some work experience?" So of course, yeah, we got her in. Of course, what do we got her to do? She worked on the seat that her great grandfather George was sat on for her work experience. Doesn't get much better than that, does it?
It really
You know,
really doesn't,
how
does it? No.
inspiring, I say. So yeah, the Canadians. Family, the only living relative, the new Gordon, used to come across. Sadly, he's no longer with us. Um, so I've covered all along we had this holy grail, and that was Daniel Garrity. We had a little bit of information that he was from Glasgow. We'd done some research and spoke to some of the museums up in Glasgow to see if they could help with the name, but it just didn't happen. And we thought, okay, we've got 4 out of 5 families on the list. Then all of a sudden, I come in one day and I had this email, and it changed everything. Can you call this number? So I did, and He said, "My name's James Robertson." He said, "But I'm not the James Robertson, obviously, that was on your aeroplane, and I'm not the son of the James Robertson that I know is involved with the project." He said, "I am the nephew of Daniel Garrity." So, of course, my mouth dropped. We found the connection at last. So I said, "How did you find out about the project?" I said, "Because we've been hunting for yourself or relation to Daniel for quite a while." And he said, "Well, you can blame the younger generation." I said, "Well, what do you mean by that?" He said, "Well, we were sat at home as a family, a few of us around, watching a film or a war film, well, I think most likely. And then one of the younger generation looked up and said, um, "Oh, did we have anybody in the Second World War?" Of course, somebody went, "Yes, Daniel Garrity." What does a young person do? Google. But. And they went, "Oh, Daniel Garrity's aeroplane is in the RAF Museum," and that's where it all kicked off. So yeah, blame mobile phones and the younger generation for the Daniel Garrity family coming to us. They'd moved out of Glasgow and they were living not that far actually from Hendon, our other museum, and so yeah, they're down that way. So yeah, that was pretty special to meet the fifth family as well, and they've met some of the other families as well. So yeah, yeah, lovely that they've had that interest all this time.
What's clearly coming across to me, Darren, this is more than just a restoration project of an aircraft. It's proving a stimulus for understanding, for memory, for appreciation, for commemoration, and I get the impression that's what's driving you as well. That just that opportunity to the catalyst for the human stories that are becoming associated, not just with this aircraft, but with the Hampden in general.
Yeah, yeah. I'd say I've been very fortunate. I, I think I'm in a privileged position. I love my job. Obviously, being serving for 26 years in the RAF, I love the RAF. So to be given this opportunity to work at the museum, I'd say, it's like everything else. It was just fate. I just happened to be left the RAF at the right time. Had to be here at Cosford. A job came up. I think after I left, I think well after I joined here, it was double figures before the next person came into the NBCC. It's that rare to get a job here. So I was very fortunate, and um, I just want to make the most of it and give back as much as I can. And I think these people deserve the recognition. And Hamden obviously being my baby when I first joined, and then getting to meet George, and it's just gone from there. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I've got many stories. Unfortunately, they're all in my head. We got RAF stories in here, so there's no excuse. I ought to sit down, get them to just do a recording of some of the people that I've been fortunate enough to meet and the families over the years. Absolutely incredible.
Where is the Hampden now?
She's in our sister museum down in most people know it as Hendon, but RAF Museum London on public to say. So it's just the fuselage and a few other little bits and pieces associated with the airplane. That area where she is at the moment is going to be developed. I hope that little bit of development will mean extra bits from the original Hampden going down as well. That I've got sat out here.
Is that temporary, Darren, or I mean, is your baby going to be away from you for a long time?
Lot of people said to me, she was built, she was restored here. She should be here at Cosford, but we're one and all museum. We have equal exhibitions going on at both sites. So, and the way I said to people, well, most people in the Midlands have been to the NBCC Open Weeks and have seen the Hampden. We've put it to a new audience down in London, so there's new people seeing us. So I'm still happy.
Darren, thank you very much for joining us. It's been fascinating to hear not only about one of Britain's most important wartime bombers, but also the dedication and the expertise and enthusiasm required to ensure its story survives for families and for future generations. Finally, apart from a visit to Hendon, where can listeners go to learn more about the Hampden restoration and the work of the museum?
The Hampden itself, we would have to go just to our London Hendon site. Yeah. Anybody up here, if they do talk to me, bump into me and talk to me about Hamdens, we can sit down for an hour. And then I might give up after about an hour of talking about Hamdens. I'd still love it. Yeah, we still got some bits here. So when people, if I get any visitors here, I do talk about the Hampden itself, even if it might only be a couple of small bits, but I talk to them and tell them what we've done.
What's your next love, Darren? Where's your heart moved? Has your heart moved on, or is it? Is it still with the Hampden?
The Hampden will always be a big part of me. Yeah, without a doubt. And what we've done, work-wise, as I mentioned earlier, it's getting this Hangar One exhibition now. So just building the odd thing like a Reaper a couple of weeks ago, Pumas and Hawks, and getting Bravo November ready, things like that. So other great airframes, because we keep going on about the Hampden. It is a lovely aeroplane, but the museum is full of beautiful aeroplanes. And I mustn't be biased, should I? I must have the same love for them all, which I do, to be honest. How can you not love Bravo November? Chinook Bravo November that's sat 50 yards away from me. Absolutely incredible helicopter, brilliant history.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, clearly your passion for this for the subject has clearly come across. Thank you, Darren. That's fantastic. Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Fighting High podcast. You can follow Fighting High on X using @FightingHigh. Visit fightinghigh.com for details about books, and follow the Fighting High publishing page on Facebook. If you have enjoyed this podcast, then please follow or subscribe and leave us a review.